Welcome, lovely viewers, to another exciting video. Hello, fellow enthusiasts. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of Greenpeace Lyng GM maize action. The Greenpeace Lyng GM maize action was a direct action on 26 July 1999 by 28 Greenpeace activist volunteers, including its executive director Peter Mond, 4th Baron Melchett, during which a field containing genetically modified GM maize owned by agrochemical company AgrEvo, later Aventis, now Plant Genetic Systems, was partially cut down on Walnut Tree Farm near Lyng, Norfolk. While it was part of a larger movement by Greenpeace against GM crops, the inclusion of Melchett and the number of arrests led it to be particularly well covered in the national press, while the eventual acquittal of the activists of theft and criminal damage was seen as a landmark verdict for activism against GM crops. In the following section, we'll be immersing ourselves in the captivating world of background. Walnut Tree Farm was an area of farmland near Lyng, Norfolk, owned by the Brigham family of William, Eddie and John Brigham, who had been a farming family for almost 300 years. William owned Walnut Tree Farm, was the eldest member of the family, and was the former chair of the Norfolk National Farmers Union NFU. William had accepted a trial of GM maize by the Norfolk agro-chemical company AgrEvo, as part of a 4-year farm-scale government trial of various GM crops. The maize was modified to be more tolerant to the AgrEvo Liberty pesticide, as well as more resistant to insect damage, making it a potential alternative to pesticides that featured atrazine. The crop was planted in May 1999, covered a 2.4-hectare field of maize, and was expected to flower in August before being harvested in October. The action was one of the 30 GM crop destructions that had also occurred in the UK in the past 15 months. However, only 3 people were remanded from these, despite 60 arrests. 3 of the 7 large-scale trials of GM crops in the UK were cut down by protesters. Earlier actions included the full destruction of a field of GM potatoes outside Cambridge in December 1997, during which activists engaged in a game of cricket and used the potatoes as cricket balls. Also that month, Human Genome Project members painted a large X across a rapeseed farm in Scotland, and demonstrators pulled up a crop of spring wheat in Lincolnshire. Get ready for an exciting exploration as we unravel the mysteries of Lyng public meeting and preparations. William Brigham had given an interview to the Eastern Daily Press about the AgrEvo deal, which prompted villagers in Lyng to hold a public meeting about the crop trial. Brigham received a letter inviting him to the discussion but did not attend, under advice from AgrEvo. Lyng villagers would later state after the incident that the brothers had consulted no one before beginning the trial. The environmental organization Greenpeace had already been opposed to the use of GM maize at the time, with Peter Mond, 4th Baron Melchett, former Labour Minister, Norfolk farmer, and executive director of the organization, being particularly vocal. Melchett wrote to Brigham, asking him to discontinue the trial. Brigham gave another interview to Farmers Weekly shortly after the letter, and said that the maize was due to flower within a week, prompting Greenpeace to begin planning for the protest action. After the protest, Melchett would state that it was vital that the crop was removed before it flowered, spreading GM pollution. Locals had urged the government to destroy the crop. The authorities are not taking the correct action, and unfortunately it has fallen to Greenpeace to protect everyone's interests. 13 of the 27 protesters taking part in the action aside from Melchett were volunteers in Greenpeace's public membership. They came from various parts of the UK, including London and its home counties, Cardiff, Manchester, Aberdeen, Yorkshire, and Leicestershire, as well as Norfolk itself. Of the 28 total, there were 19 men and 9 women, all between the ages of 21 and 57. Protesters aside from Melchett included a vicar and a beauty consultant, as well as a Baptist minister, a vegan and vegetarian restaurateur, an engineer, and a mature student studying social policy and environmental science. Michael Wins, Greenpeace's East of England coordinator, lived nearby to Lyng, and was summoned to London on a need-to-know basis in the summer of 1999 to organise their action. Unwin since stated that he was told by organisers that their likelihood of arrest was 100%. A woman named Nicole Sanderson would also take part. Brace yourself for an enlightening exploration of Walnut Tree Farm direct action as we dive into its profound implications. Before dawn on 26 July 1999, Melchett drove a wagon with an industrial crop cutter attached from his family farm in Ringstead, Norfolk to Lyng. The other 27 activists mostly travelled to Lyng from London in 2 minibuses. They met at a rendezvous at 5 a.m. outside the GM field of Walnut Tree Farm and waited behind a hedge. At 5:09 a.m., the group of Greenpeace volunteers, dressed in white boiler suits with the Greenpeace logo on the back, led by Melchett and accompanied by 4 journalists and a cameraman, cut the padlock to the field gate. They drove a tractor, the crop cutter equipped with forked blades, and a tipper truck into the field, blocked the inside of the field entrance with the truck, and repadlocked the gate. The activists began pulling and cutting down the maize planted on the field, using their machinery as well as strimmers. Farm owner William Brigham interrupted the demonstration at 5:25, calling one activist a criminal. Activists began loading the cut crop into bags and putting them onto the 7.5-ton truck. Melchett later stated in court that the group intended to remove the entire crop and to return it to its owner, AgrEvo, in King's Lynn. Melchett came to speak to Brigham, arguing that we're just doing what people want, and that the maize was about to flower and pollute nearby crops. Brigham argued that he also had local support. At 5:28, Eddie Brigham arrived on a tractor with a bucket attached and ran through the barred gate to the field. He proceeded to ram the truck blocking the entrance to get his tractor into the field, then chased various Greenpeace protesters, causing them to flee further into the crop. He cornered and rammed the Greenpeace industrial crop cutter and used the tractor's bucket to immobilize its rotors. Greenpeace's members were reduced only to manual labor, with all of their vehicles incapacitated. At 5:33, police arrived at the scene and shouted at those involved to stop it. All of you, which was not obeyed by either party, stating that you've made your political points. I'd rather you stopped. The police began to arrest the protesters. John Brigham drove into the field on a Massey Ferguson tractor, which also had a bucket. More police arrived by 5:40 and arrested some of the volunteers. They did not resist arrest and were led out of the field. Melchett was also escorted out of the field by a police officer after stating that they were enacting decontamination of the countryside and that they were doing something which the public wants and is for the benefit of the environment. William Brigham chanted Melchett, Melchett, at Melchett as he was escorted past him. Speaking to Guardian journalist John Vidal at the scene, William stated that he found it amazing that a man who calls himself a Democrat and is a former government minister sees fit to take the law into his own hands, and argued that he himself had been growing the genetically modified crop for environmental reasons, as he said he had used the crops with the more friendly Liberty herbicide produced by AgrEvo. John Brigham drove his tractor out of the field and rammed one of the 2 Greenpeace vans that were parked outside it before chasing one of the volunteers around the field, eventually relenting. Greenpeace volunteers were made to sit in the field by the police. The Brigham brothers were also restrained by the police, and William stated that this has nothing to do with genetically modified organisms, it's whether we want democratic government in this country or anarchy. 28 people were arrested and taken to police stations around Norfolk. John Brigham collapsed later in the day, allegedly due to stress, and was taken to hospital. He was later discharged. As we progress, let's zoom in on aftermath and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. The Guardian estimated that only a sixth of the field had been cut down by the end of the altercation. An AgrEvo spokesman accused the protesters of trespass and vandalism, and of denying the public the opportunity to observe whether GM crops were truly safe. Greenpeace also accused AgrEvo of planning to increase its GM plantings for the year 2000. It was found that Greenpeace had caused around £650 £750 of damage, but that the Bridham brothers, who were not charged, had caused about £5,000 of damage to the vehicles owned by Greenpeace. Let's now shift our focus to criminal charges and Regina v. Melchett trials and explore the ways in which it shapes our perspective. Melchett was charged with theft and criminal damage, and was refused bail by the court, spending 2 nights in a Norwich remand centre despite plans to fly to Tanzania for a 2-week family holiday. The 27 other protesters were charged with the same offences, but some were released until 5 August, with 20 of them also refused bail. Jeremy Corbyn commented on the arrest, stating that the charges and holding of Melchett overnight actually makes him and others a martyr to the cause. All 28 were committed to Crown Court on 19 September 1999, and all pleaded not guilty, opting for a jury trial. They were given bail and ordered to appear at Norwich Crown Court on 15 November. 2 court trials were held under Judge David Mellor. The first was held from 3 to 19 April 2000. Mellor stressed to the jury before the trial that this case is not about whether GM crops are a good or a bad thing, and that it is not and cannot be about which side is in the right on one of the great debates of our time. During the trial, Product Development Manager for AgrEvo UK Judith Jordan argued that the crops were destroyed at a loss of £17,400, but under cross-examination stated that the testing of the GM crops was continuing this year. The jury found the activist not guilty of theft, but was unable to reach a verdict on whether they had committed criminal damage after a 7.5-hour deliberation, and was discharged. On 20 September 2000, following the retrial which took 2 weeks with 5 hours of jury deliberation, all of those charged were cleared by the court of causing criminal damage. Mellor ruled that the £250,000 costs for the trials would be paid by the prosecution. The trials were thought to be one of the largest groups of defendants tried in the same court in British legal history. During the trials, the juries accepted the defense argument that they were acting to prevent GM pollen from unlawfully polluting neighbouring organic crops and gardens, as this fell under the Criminal Damage Act 1971. They had intended to fully remove the crop, thus attempting to prevent a greater crime of crop contamination. Greenpeace stated that the acquittal decision was a legal landmark and that they were delighted by the verdict, while Melchett again called on the government and Tony Blair to end the GM farm trials following the victory, putting forward that the government is currently reviewing separation distances imposed between GM crops and other similar crops, separation distances which we said were completely inadequate when we took action in July 1999. The trial was seen as a reflection of UK public opinion on the debate around GM crops. The National Farmers Union, in writing to Home Secretary Jack Straw, stated that the acquittal was perverse and that it gave the green light to vandalism and trespass, as did William Bridham, who also said that they used bully boy tactics to get their point across, and today the bully has won. The Department of the Environment said the trials of GM crops would not cease, and a spokesman argued that if we halted our strictly controlled research, then there would be widespread GM crop planting without us getting the evidence we need. The Independent noted that Melchett achieved the highest profile of any UK environmental activist for a decade following the acquittal. Brace yourself for an enlightening exploration of TV appearances as we dive into its profound implications. Melchett made several appearances on UK television following the action, notably appearing on Channel 4 News for an interview with Jon Snow, who asked him, "My lord, are you sure you did the right thing?" Brace yourself for a deep dive into reactions as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. Before the second trial, a Nature Biotechnology article criticized Greenpeace for referring to the 28 activists involved in the protest as the Greenpeace 28, as it said the phrase had connotations of innocence in the same way as the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6. It also called the action eco-terrorism. American media outlet The Washington Post argued that the defendants have received consistently sympathetic treatment in the British media. The action and court trials thereafter were compared twice by The Guardian and once by The Washington Post to a similar storyline in the BBC radio soap opera The Archers that was broadcast the same year as the incident. Melchett was compared to Tommy Archer, who in the story was charged with criminal damage after an attack on a field of GM crops, and who also prepared a similar successful defense. Upon Melchett's death in 2018, the incident was included frequently in his obituaries. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update from my channel.